Today's show is sponsored by Zesty, and Zesty wants to know if you've had enough with managing your AWS commitments. If it were only purchasing commitments, fine. But let's face it, the capacity planning, the back and forth, the ongoing optimization, choosing between 1 year, 3 year, savings plans, reserved instances, don't you want to just get back to being an engineer again? This is where Zesty comes in. A fully automated commitment management solution that achieves over 45% discounts on your EC2 with a 100% buyback guarantee. What does that mean? It means you'll never over-provision again. So join DevOps teams like Gong, Armis, Amdocs, WalkMe, and Firebolt, and be an engineer again while achieving the highest savings hands-free. Just go to zesty.co/savings to get your free potential savings evaluation. It takes no more than 5 minutes. That's zesty.co/savings.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We are coming to you live from the massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Hope everybody is doing well as we roll into the month of April. Amazing that we've continued to move along. The year just kind of keeps cranking along, even though we're still somewhat at home. Hopefully everybody is doing well. Hopefully the weather is starting to change in your neck of the woods, whether, it's sort of the April showers bring May flowers, or if you're in a part of the world that's a little bit warmer, maybe you're already experiencing that. Or if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, you're probably experiencing kind of the beginnings of, of winter, or that's fall season and so forth. So anyways, hope everybody is doing well. On the Sunday's Perspective show, we always try and, step away from the interviews, kind of think about what's going on in the industry and grab some topics that are kind of relevant. And this past week, we saw the IPO of DigitalOcean. And for those of you that have followed the show for a while, you're probably very familiar with DigitalOcean. Whether or not you use the service or not, it really kind of got started as the simplified, scaled back version of what was going on in the cloud. And, it was one of those things where at the time, it's been going on for 10 years or so. So it's not a brand new company, a brand new cloud, but they were going to be very focused on trying to make things simpler for developers, trying to make the services that they have while they were, evolved over time, always be focused on simple. And their IPO this week got me thinking, are we ever going to see the cloud evolve to become simpler, right? We now see 200 plus services in Amazon Web Services. We see, 100 plus, 150 plus in AWS or in Azure and in GCP. We see thousands of SaaS services. Things are pretty complicated. And to a certain extent, in our industry, depending on where you are, we kind of glorify complexity. We love to talk about, boy, it'd be great if the technology was simpler. But, we tend to sort of glorify that. We talk about 10x engineers, and we talk about people that have, 5 certifications and all these sorts of things. And so, I got to thinking about, will we ever see the cloud become simplified? Right? I'm going to kind of dig into that right after the break. Today's show is sponsored by CBT Nuggets. We know that Cloudcast listeners are curious about technologies, but how are you really learning to master the technologies needed to be a cloud expert? When I got my first industry certification, a Cisco CCIE, I literally spent every weekend for 6 months setting up environments and trying to teach myself all these complex technologies. Nowadays, CBT Nuggets gets rid of all that hassle. Everything's on the web, from self-paced learning with an instructor to virtual labs that are up and running in minutes. So whether you're looking for an infrastructure, cloud, security, or app dev certification, CBT Nuggets has you covered. Check it out at cbtnuggets.com/cloudcast to sign up for a free learner account. This unlocks tons of great training, and you'll be entered into a drawing for a free 6-month premium subscription. That's cbtnuggets.com/cloudcast. And we're back. And folks, as I mentioned at the top of the show, I kind of want to focus on simplicity. And, again, the DigitalOcean IPO kind of got me thinking about it. There's a weird thing that goes on in our industry is that, oftentimes we love the things that make our lives simpler, whether that's, a great script or something that automates something for us, an automation, an if-then type of thing. Sometimes it's just, we love the user experience of like an Apple product or something. And, I know some of you don't, but, bear with me, you understand what I'm talking about. And yet our industry tends to also sort of, love the complexity, right? It's, people love to buy the product that has the most features. We get these, massive on the vendor side of things, you get these massive RFPs and RFIs and things that have hundreds and hundreds of requirements. And, then you realize that, these things get built, and over time, having worked for a lot of vendors with a lot of products and so forth, you often find out that only 30% of the features, 20% of the features of the thing that you've sold to some company or that a customer is using end up getting used. And so, we have this fascination with complexity in our industry. We like to think that we like simplicity, but for whatever reason, we kind of keep coming back to complexity. And I don't know if that's just because you can, because, you always feel like, well, I'm just going to ask for that next thing because I don't want to do it myself. I don't want to figure out how to put two and two together. And I understand that, in many industries, things are complex. You've got regulatory requirements, you've got complicated security, you've got other things. But, we really haven't in the, let's call it last 10 years or so of cloud computing, we just really haven't seen a massive push by anybody to really disrupt the market with something simpler. And, it got me thinking, we've seen this in other industries. We saw, times when, the industry got disrupted. Say it was, going back to the financial services industry when Charles Schwab, for those of you that remember back in the day, kind of disrupted the way that, the regular person could get access to the trading floors of Wall Street, right? Sort of disrupted it, made it simple, right? Make it so that anybody could get an account to be able to trade on a trading floor. We've seen certain products in certain industries try and make things simpler, right? Like we've seen self-service checkout at grocery stores. We've seen that sort of phenomenon happen. We've seen certain things in our industry where technology will make it simpler, but I think about the clouds and they still continue to be complex. And in fact, every November we celebrate AWS reInvent and the 50 or 60 or 70 new features or whatever that Jeff Barr writes a blog about and so forth. So, I got to thinking, will we see this? And, as we tend to do on the Sunday Perspective show, I'm going to kind of break it down into three areas. This show's always a little bit shorter than the one on Wednesday. So I'm going to break it down into three areas. The first one's going to be in around applications. The second one's going to be about pricing and sort of the cost of using the cloud. And the third one's going to be about interconnecting these services together. So sort of, integrations and so forth. So let me start off with applications. I thought about this a lot. And, when the building blocks we had for cloud were very IaaS centric, they were compute, storage, networking, maybe database as a service, the basic things, an IAM type of service. It made sense that things were going to be complex because all we had really done was just move the data center from some building that you owned or rented into a data center that Amazon or Azure or Google or DigitalOcean or IBM or Oracle or, whoever owned, right? You sort of shifted that thing, but you didn't really shift the complexity. The services were still sort of foundational building blocks. And then over time, we did see a number of things come along. And, maybe I'm not taking a long enough view on this. I mean, we've seen SaaS applications come along. That's been fantastic. Pretty much anything that you want to get as a business application or, in a lot of cases, a consumer application, you can find as a SaaS application. Of course, the trade-off is, well, you get what they give you, right? We had PaaS. PaaS was going to sort of be that thing that was going to take away the complexity of all the infrastructure, simplify things for developers. And PaaS never really met those goals, right? As James Governor over at RedMonk likes to say, every new application platform is trying to reinvent Heroku. And Heroku was great for what it did. It was very opinionated, kind of had this 12-factor thing, but we've never kind of seen the great, super simplified, complete experience for PaaS. We've seen bits and pieces of it, and we've seen what people do on top of Kubernetes. We've seen what Cloud Foundry tried to do. We talked about that a few shows ago. Heroku kind of, hit a point and then it got bought up by Salesforce. We just haven't really seen the PaaS space, if you will, kind of meet its goal. And then you go, okay, well, what else is out there? What might be filling in the blanks, right? Well, we've seen low code, and low code is, I guess, sort of doing its thing. It's hard to totally get a grasp on it. I think partially because maybe low code learned from PaaS and trying to be not so opinionated. We've got lots of platforms that are sort of kind of low code. We have the robotic process automation, RPA, automation, We covered that a little bit on previous shows. And so you do have this sort of thing that's, on the low code RPA side of things, kind of there for business analysts, right? It's sort of like Excel and then a little bit more, some drop and drag stuff. And so I guess that sort of fills in some gaps and so forth. But it still feels like there's something that could be better. It feels like there's something simpler. So for example, like if I'm a small business, yes, I could probably sort out picking out the 8 or 10 or 12 things that I need, maybe a payroll application and a supply chain type of application, maybe something that helps with marketing. But there's still nothing that even further simplifies that. If I want sort of back end of a small business as a service, I can't just go get that, right? Like I'd have to sign up for a long-term contract. I'd probably have to find some consultants. Why can't I do that on a month-to-month basis like I can do for other things in cloud? If I start off as a startup and I need to scale it into a multi-customer or multi-country business, which if I'm doing things online, you probably have to do, why can't I do that as a service, right? Like again, I have to stitch together 8, 10, 12, 15 things. I probably have to hire some Accenture level consultants who understand different currencies and so forth. Why can't I do that on a month-to-month basis? Or even just, certain parts of the business, right? We hear about marketing tech stacks, and there are things that are out there that help you with this. But, if I want DemandGen-as-a-Service, right? Like I want the content to be written for me. I want it to be SEO, and I want it to be, right? Like we think about more and more, how can we, sort of do these things without having to have entire organizations or having to piece all these things together. So maybe that's what I'm looking for, is that opportunity to say, yes, all the business, the building blocks are there. But now that we're a decade in, are there opportunities for somebody to build those sort of back ends of business as a service, right? As opposed to having to figure out how to put all these pieces together, because they've all been done before. We've seen thousands of successful companies do it. Why can't that become its own sort of space in there? And maybe that's sort of the application level simplicity I'm looking for. I don't know. I'm trying to work through this in my mind. I'm sort of working through it here on the podcast as well. The second area I want to talk about is pricing, right? It's sort of funny, cloud was going to simplify things. It was going to make things on demand. And, from a psychological perspective, if you start charging things instead of being tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and millions of dollars, I price it, at 3 cents an hour, 10 cents an hour. Well, psychologically, I think, oh, that's much cheaper, right? I'm not paying nearly as much. And since it's on demand, I can turn it on and turn it off. It must just be cheaper. And yet we realize, we can listen to a Corey Quinn, or we can look at a Cloudability, or, the dozens of companies who, focus on kind of cost management, cost optimization, price scheduling, all these sort of things. It's still really complicated. Nobody ever really knows what their bill is going to be at the end of the month. Yes, you can buy credits, and yes, you can, sort of prepay some things, and you can do some stuff, but there's still all sorts of work around tagging and cost optimization, not knowing exactly how much your network bill is going to be. Is it too much ingress traffic, too much external traffic? How much NAT traffic am I paying for? Like, it's amazing to me that we haven't seen a huge pushback from the industry, from end user customers saying, look, I need to know what my bill is going to be, right? Like, I need to figure out some way for you to build me a better set of tools to model what it's going to look like. And I don't need cost consultants or cloud economists or, super expensive tools. I want you to take my applications, look at them, somehow model them, and tell me what my bill is going to be, right? We just haven't really reached that. I mean, the fact that we just have these massive ecosystems around cost management and pricing. And, I know people can say, well, gosh, we've had that forever. So, what's the problem? Like, computers are complicated and you don't exactly know what your traffic load is going to look like. Well, there are businesses in which services have been put together so you better understand what they look like. And maybe that is just a matter of, people better budgeting, better negotiating, better kind of planning. But the fact that, there's still just this massive, massive ecosystem to help us figure it out. It's a little bit like people talk about like the tax laws. Well, the tax laws are too complicated. So, that keeps accountants employed. I don't know, maybe that's what we're stuck with. But, I feel like from a pricing perspective, the fact that every service is different, every service is priced differently, every service has different caveats. Again, maybe these keep coming back to SaaS sort of has figured it out. And when you're dealing with the low level building blocks, that's just the nature of what you get. But, I feel like in terms of more and more companies, everyone talks about cloud is still in the first or second inning. It's still in the early days. I mean, in order for it to be adopted widely, by people who don't have the best of the best of Silicon Valley talent, but they want to be able to, compete in their regional business, or they want to move into a new market. The ability to understand what your pricing model looks like, your cost model for your business looks like, is really important. And I don't feel like cloud is necessarily given us a straightforward answer at that point, right? There's too many PhDs needed to figure all this stuff out. And the last thing I had on my list is I think about, where things are too complicated. And again, maybe this is just the nature of where we are with brownfields and so forth, is really around interconnecting services, right? It is difficult to modernize an application. It is difficult to migrate an application from your data center into the cloud. Okay, we all sort of understand that, because from a legacy application perspective, it wasn't necessarily designed to be moved. Maybe it wasn't originally designed to interconnect with 10 other services that you're trying to interconnect with. But we've seen progress in that space, right? We've seen things like the services and capabilities around things like Mulesoft or Camel, like that Red Hat integration delivers. We've seen like API gateways like Apigee and others that are kind of there for your sort of typical Gartner 4Rs, 5Rs application rehosting, replatforming, all that sort of stuff, and that sort of works through. It's complicated, but if it's necessary, you can do it. And so I start to wonder, but for new applications, should it be simpler, right? Like, maybe for SaaS, for the most common types of SaaS, when you want to interconnect your application to a Twitter or an Okta API or something, yeah, they've gotten pretty good at that stuff. But, should it be easier, right? Should, as a business, if somebody has a business idea, should you have to go off and find this world-class technology group to help your back end, right? And you always hear these stories of, places like MIT Sloan, who, is famously matches together somebody with a great business idea with, great technologist in the MBA program. And I feel like that's a lot of times what happens with the VCs, is they're going to take a couple of smart founders, technology founders, and match them up with business people. But, if as a business person, you could figure out how to wire these things together, if it was simpler to do that. Again, a lot of these things I keep thinking about is, if I'm a business person with an idea and I don't necessarily know the right technology people, I don't know how to think about it, but I know how to map it out. I know what it should look like in my mind. I feel like maybe those integration pieces could be simpler as well. And again, this might be, integrating a IaaS-driven service, a serverless service, with a SaaS service and a PaaS service. Should it be simpler if those things are exposing well-defined, well-known APIs to be able to do that? I don't know. Maybe, again, I'm asking too much. Maybe integration is just by its nature sort of a complicated thing. And, as I look at sort of all the stuff we've talked about here, writing applications, complicated stuff. Pricing, complicated stuff. Interconnecting and integrating services, complicated stuff. But I feel like, as I've looked at other industries and I've looked at other examples of places where we've seen big progress in our industry or in our lives, or things that make things simpler for us, there's always something that's a big leap forward. And I feel like maybe over the next 10 years, we've gotten people to get out of their old ways in the data center. They've moved to the cloud. We've learned how to use the cloud. Maybe the next 10 years will be about simplifying things. Maybe that DigitalOcean IPO is an early stepping stone. I don't know. It got me thinking. Maybe it's not possible. Maybe this stuff just, by its nature, it's computers. It's complicated. And in order to master it and have a business differentiation, you just got to deal with the complexity. But I feel like as an industry, there's massive opportunity for people to start figuring out how to be, that next big stepping stone. And maybe it'll come from AWS and Azure and Google. Maybe it'll come from somebody else. Maybe there's the next DigitalOcean out there that's going to help us do that. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up. I know this was a little rambly because I've been thinking about it for a while. I've been thinking about it for a few days, and I was trying to kind of put my thoughts together, both where we could be going, but also a little bit of complaints and grief and about, kind of where we are today and why it couldn't be simpler. So anyways, thank you all for listening, as always, to the Sunday Perspectives here on Cloudcast. Hopefully you've enjoyed these as well as the Wednesday ones. Thanks for telling a friend. Thanks for helping us grow the community. Thanks for giving us feedback. We started to see a few more reviews on Apple Podcasts, and we really appreciate that. It helps us not only grow the show, but it also gets the word out through those podcasting channels as well. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.